Have you ever had an out-of-body experience or slipped into a very realistic daydream once in a while? 15-year-old Lizanne has, multiple times. But they're more than just daydreams. She believes that someone is trying to take over her body. The earliest incident Lizanne can remember was when she was 8 years old. She was cast in her school's musical about vampires. One of the musical numbers required them to form a pyramid, sort of like what cheerleaders do. Lizanne was on the second to the bottom row. She had never done anything like this before and was incredibly nervous. And then, Lizanne couldn't move. She was paralyzed. Her entire body was frozen in place. She couldn't open her mouth to call for help or wave her hand for someone's attention. Then everything began to fade to black. Lizanne was alone, until a young boy appeared in front of her. He had short blonde hair and clean, semi-formal clothes. He held his hand out, motioning for Lizanne to come to him. She had never seen this boy, but felt compelled to go to him. No longer paralyzed, Lizanne stood up and ran towards the little boy, and then found herself back in the auditorium. She crashed onto the ground and rolled off the stage, her fellow cast members following the same fate. High-pitched screams filled the auditorium. Lizanne tried to stand up, but realized very quickly that her arm was broken. "Are you okay? How did this happen?" Lizanne's mom, Melanie, asked as she drove her daughter to the hospital. "I fell during rehearsal," she said, leaving out a very important detail. Lizanne continued to have these strange blackouts and thought it would be best to not let her mother worry, so she kept them to herself. When she was 13, she was waiting at the train station alone. It was a hot day and she had a tendency to get overwhelmed by heat. A train sped by and she was engulfed in a cloud of hot air. She started to feel faint. Then everything around her turned black. She was back in that familiar void. That same blonde boy appeared a few dozen feet in front of her. "What are you doing over there? Get over here! The train's coming, hurry!" In a daze, Lizanne began to walk towards the boy, until she felt someone grab her from the back. Lizanne snapped back into reality, just as a train whipped past, narrowly missing her nose. "Are you trying to get yourself killed? Pay attention!" The summer after that incident, Lizanne and her friends were hanging out at the nearby lake. They were laying out on their towels by the water and joking around. And then her friends said a word that triggered something inside of Lizanne. She doesn't remember exactly what her friends said, but she remembers her body just stopped working. She closed her eyes and saw a face with no eyes and no nose, just a smile, like the Cheshire Cat, but much more evil. She reopened her eyes and found herself in the middle of the lake. Lizanne didn't know how to swim. She started flailing her arms and legs around in a panic, trying to stay above water. Her friend jumped in and was able to pull her safely ashore. After everyone had calmed down, Lizanne turned to her friends. "What just happened?" You started mumbling really weird things, and then you stood up, turned around, and screamed at us, and said that you were going to kill yourself.
Kill myself.
And then you jumped into the lake. "I don't remember any of that." These blackouts were starting to get much more serious. Lizanne had kept these incidences from her mother because she didn't want her to worry, but something very strange was happening and Lizanne had to know why. "Mom, I have to tell you something." Lizanne began to tell her mom about all the blackouts, and her eyes became wide with terror. Lizanne thought it was because she didn't believe her. They sat in silence for a few moments. Melanie took a deep breath. "I was right. I was right this whole time." Melanie had sworn that she wouldn't tell her daughter about what happened when she was younger. But after hearing the fear in her daughter's voice, she knew it was time. When Lizanne was small, she was very close with her great-grandfather on her mother's side, which is her Indonesian side. Indonesians believe in the concept of Ru. It is the spirit that continues to exist long after the physical body has gone. It is far beyond human understanding and a very ingrained belief in Indonesia. So Lizanne's great-grandfather told her stories of Rue to help her cope with the fact that he would physically be leaving her soon. And that day came when Lizanne turned 4. Despite the comforting stories her great-grandfather told her, she was still upset and missed him dearly. Melanie began to worry about her daughter's well-being as she noticed that she was more emotionally closed off than before. So every night she would take a peek inside her room to check on her. Most nights she'd be muttering gibberish through tears under her breath. But some nights she wasn't in her bed because she was sleepwalking. There are a few times when Melanie walked into Lizanne's room to find her sitting on the ground, surrounded by her dolls and stuffed animals. She'd be having a full-on conversation with them while her eyes were shut. While it was always a bit of a shock, nothing compared to the time when she found Lizanne standing at her open bedroom window, reaching in front of her crying,
"Grandpa!"
Melanie rushed over to her daughter and pulled her from the ledge. "Lizanne, what were you doing?"
"I was going to Grandpa."
While Melanie was incredibly superstitious, Lizanne's father, Ryan, was not. Melanie insisted that they take her to a priest to make sure something otherworldly was not going on. But Ryan shut the idea down. Instead, he took her to a psychiatrist who explained that Lizanne's behavior was completely normal for a young, grieving child. So after that visit, Lizanne's parents agreed to never bring this up again. Without telling Ryan, Melanie took Lizanne to the nearby church. They told the priest what had been going on, and he explained the situation. When Lizanne's great-grandfather died, she became susceptible to spiritual attack. The Rue of a young boy saw this opportunity and attached himself to Lizanne. He waits until she's emotionally vulnerable and tricks her into harming herself. His goal is to have her join him in the spirit world. "Can you get rid of him?" Melanie begged. "I'm sorry, but I cannot. You're too late." "What do you mean?" "You waited too long. He has been attached to your daughter for so long that to get rid of him would mean getting rid of her." "I am so sorry."